Audio Unleashed. All right. Well, we're recording, so let's go, man. What do you want to talk about?
Let's talk about Danny Ritchie.
Ooh,
let's talk about Spotify. Let's talk about vinyl. Let's talk about other stuff. Are we done?
Wow. Is that our intro?
No, the intro is, okay, we have 3 topics to talk about. Fascinating things that audio enthusiasts will be delighted to hear us discuss, and no one else will be interested. So, but that's by design. We're targeted. We're not for everybody here at Audio
Unleashed.
So anyway, Danny Ritchie, GR Research. We talk about him a lot.
Yeah, quite a bit.
I mean, I watch his videos, but he does some, what he basically reworks speakers. People send him speakers that they don't like, and he reworks them. And so, but, I watch some of them, but a lot of them, it's like, he reworks some, I don't know, Polk speaker or something or whatever, or I don't know, whatever. And so but he did the Watt Puppy, which is a famous speaker from Wilson Audio. I mean, really one of the first big, high-end audio speakers that cost like $10,000, right? And, Wilson Audio did make a more expensive speaker, but this was like the one that really kind of captured the imagination of audiophiles. And it was a top-ranked speaker in stereophile. But the speaker Cognoscenti knew that it had some issues. And so, and by that, I mean me, and other people as well. Lots of people I've talked about. We're kind of like, why are the audio writers raving about this thing? But anyway, so Danny gets a hold of it. And the whole time, I had to see what he did. And the whole time I'm watching the video, I'm like, yep, that's exactly what it needs. Yep. And so he's got a 2-parter. It's like he talks about what he's going to do, and then he shows the results that he got. And it's a good excuse for us to talk about speaker design and some of the mistakes people make, and some of the ways that they can be fixed, and some of the ways that you can evaluate the quality of a speaker.
Yeah. And it's also good because I think within these 2 videos, there is evidence that Danny is responding to some of the criticism against him, which I think we'll talk about a little bit too.
We will indeed. And then we're going to gracefully segue into a discussion about something that has very little to do with speakers.
Yeah. So we actually had this article in the idea board last time around and decided to punt because it's a topic we've talked about a good bit. So this is an article from The New Yorker by Hua Su, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's actually this article is a review of a book by Liz Pelly called Mood Machine: The Rise of Spotify and the Cost of the Perfect Playlist. It covers a lot of the same territory that we have talked about before with regard to Spotify, with specifically the ways they are manipulating the music market and the relationship between artists and Spotify and things like that. And I think we kind of decided, we've been here, we've done that, we've talked about it. Do we need to dig in again? Well, then our buddy John Darko posted a video called Bye-Bye Spotify. And we thought, there's some momentum happening here. There is an exodus from Spotify. Is it massive? Is it noteworthy? I don't know, but there are more and more people fleeing from Spotify. So we're going to talk about it a little bit, talk about why, talk about more about, the things that Spotify does that maybe we have issues with. And what else?
And we're also going to talk about a surprise bugbear.
Ooh.
I am the first one to make this observation, I think, about a different streaming service that I think is just as problematic culturally as Spotify is, but we're going to make that a surprise.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're going to segue that into?
Sean Olive, famed audio researcher and friend of the pod, sent us this article about that was titled "The Physics of Vinyl: A Sonic Hug in a World of Noise," which is just like kind of It's like somebody walking up to us and saying, please hit me. Please hit me. Anyway, the article it attracted a lot of attention on Facebook because everybody was piling on. But then the controversy was amplified by what?
Oh, the fact that the article has just disappeared. So it was originally published on LinkedIn. I don't know if it was published on The Art of Slowdown, which is the blog for this Apex Audio group that Andrew runs. But anyway, So I had originally put the article, the LinkedIn post in our idea board, and I'm like, I'll come back to that later. I will finish reading that like the day we record. So it's fresh on my mind. And I went to pull it up and it was gone. And I went to Google to search for the headline, and it's like, Google's like, yep, that's a thing that was posted on LinkedIn. And then you click on it and it's like, there's nothing here. What are you talking about, bro? There's no article called that. So there's a saying on the internet, nothing is ever truly deleted from the internet. And so I was like, I'm going to go retrieve this one way or the other. I'm going to retrieve this text so we can at least read it. It has been scrubbed, man. It has been scrubbed from the Internet Archive. It has been scrubbed from Google's cache. If it was ever posted on the Art of Slowdown as well, it has been scrubbed from there as well. In fact, the Internet Archive doesn't have any evidence of that website even existing in January, which I think this is the only article he's posted in January. So it's very curious that this thing has been intentionally memory holed, which, what did we talk about a few episodes ago? The Streisand effect.
Yeah.
You can delete it, but you can't delete the repercussions, buddy.
So the article, though, was trying to present a scientific case for the superiority of vinyl. It's a scientific and cultural case. And I did read the whole thing, which I can recite from memory. Or I can paraphrase from memory. At the same time, though, I got a nice little pitch thing a little marketing thing from Absolute Sound, which is our favorite publication to beat up on. And it's an article, a little brief article that, summarizing their opinion. Michael Fremer, the guru of vinyl, even though he hates to be called the guru of vinyl, but, he has made himself that. So too bad. He wrote about this Wilson Benesch GMT1 turntable, which costs nearly $400,000. I'm kind of like, all right, I just got to see what this thing's all about. And I started reading his review, and then I started to look at this YouTube demo he did, where he actually recorded the sound from this turntable onto YouTube. And we're going to talk about the cracks between what he claims and what he's able to demonstrate. There's a bit of a discrepancy. And then our good friend John Higgins, at the same time, roughly, chimed in on digital trends with his discussion of the same topic.
Yeah.
And we're going to just we're going to do a deep dive on vinyl. Well, it's as deep as we can go in 15 minutes or so.
There you go.
And then after we finish that, Patreon subscribers are going to get a fascinating discussion about what?
Alternatives to Dolby Atmos. So there's several to talk about, interestingly enough. We've got one called Eclipse Audio, which is from Samsung and Google. We've got one called Audio Scenic M5 H or High D. Man, I can't even... I struggle to read the name of this thing, so that's never a good sign. Also, something from Music Unit called Deep Stereo.
And I think we can even do a live demo of one.
Oh, nice.
So Patreon subscribers, put on those headphones.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably already have them on, but whatever.
That's a good point. All right. Hey, before we get into the episode proper, I wanted to read an email that we got from, or I was a comment from a patron. Best I can tell, the name should be pronounced Michael Smucker. If that is wrong, deepest apologies, sir. But here's the comment. This is related to the last episode when we were talking about the guy who did the same master on different formats and did the direct listening comparisons between them. And we were talking about how when he, played the vinyl and digitized it and brought it into the digital audio workstation, we noticed that the peaks were actually higher than the original master. And there was some speculation as to why. Is this like a Gibbs phenomenon thing? What's going on? Why are there higher peaks on the vinyl than existed in the master? So this is the comment. Hi, Dennis and Brent. Just a note to your remark about the increased peaks or change of visual representation of the waveform on different media, like vinyl. He says the dominant cause for that is simply a phase shift anywhere in the chain. In the case of vinyl, both mastering and the pickup part, there could be a multitude of places where this can happen. Not necessarily so much in the RIAA filter. The shift caused by the emphasis filter will be compensated by de-emphasis during playback if those two are reasonably within spec. But you also likely have cartridge characteristics, a rumble filter, devices with transformers and or capacitive coupling, intentional manipulation and pre-mastering by an engineer with his toolbox before the lathe, etc. And he goes on and talks about an experiment that we can do in Reaper with our own music to sort of show this phenomenon and show those peaks increasing when a phase shift is introduced in the signal chain. So I'm going to try this out at some point, not in time for this episode to come out, but it's an interesting point, and it was a very informative comment. So any of our patrons, go read that comment on the last episode. But it goes on. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I thought it was it was more definitive perspective than either you or I offered. So thank you, Michael.
Now it's time to deal with the Watt Puppy at long last.
Mm-hmm.
The Watt Puppy came out, I want to say around 1990, 89, something like that, and it was $10,000 or something, which was a lot back then. Maybe it was $12,000. It was a lot of money. And Dave Wilson is the guy who founded Wilson Audio. Was I think he used to do classical recordings, and he lamented the fact that there weren't any good mobile monitors that he could take and actually use. I can attest. I was in studios a lot back then, and the monitors were pretty dicey. It didn't stop people from making awesome records, but so he came up with this thing called the Wilson Audio Tiny Tot, which is a two-way speaker. I think a 7-inch woofer and a 1-inch tweeter. And it has like a first-order crossover, and it kind of leans way back. It's made of corian, which is really heavy. It's like a countertop material. And there's like a big handle on the back, so you could lug two of them around if you're going to do a remote recording or something. So he sold those, but then he also came up with this puppy thing, which is a woofer module that goes under it. You plug the speaker cable into the puppy, and then the puppy, it powers the woofers, and the woofers have a low pass filter so that high frequencies don't come out of them. Inside the woofer is a high pass filter that filters the lows out of the output that you then wire into the puppy, right? So that the puppy is, the bass is filtered out of the puppy. It's an unusual design, to say the least, but it was raved about. It was revered. I heard a few different iterations of it. According to our good pal Steve Guttenberg, who worked at Sound by Singer and sold these things, he said the 3 was the one they really got right. I think they made 7 different versions of it.
Well, actually, it's back. There's an 8 now.
Is there really?
Recently. Yeah, so I think it was for the 50th anniversary. They brought the Watt Puppy back.
But anyway, legendary speaker. Except, anyone who knows a lot about speaker design, which frankly, I don't think there were that many people back in 1990 or something that really did. So this was done before there was really good science on speakers. But you could, once I learned more about speakers, I'm kind of like, yeah, there's problems with that design that you wouldn't want to do. But Danny, somebody sent him a pair of these things, and he got the evaluation 100% right, in my view. I mean, because the things I know about this speaker that I would fix are the exact same things he ended up fixing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were basically 4 problems with it. Number one, the woofers were connected in series for some reason, which meant the woofer section impedance was like 2-point-something ohms. But I think he put a plate amp inside it anyway, standard subwoofer plate amp in it to power the woofers and hooked them up in parallel. So that problem solved. There was this high pass filter, basically I think it's a series capacitor, a big series capacitor going into there, but that capacitor interacts with the crossover in the watt, right? So, and with the reactance of the drivers and the crossover and everything, and gives you a non-optimal response, because he shows the frequency response to this thing, and it's pretty choppy. It's a lot of peaks and dips, and they're not huge in magnitude, like 3 dB, 4 dB, but still enough to sound weird. And he also finds that, so he gets rid of that. I think he executes it in line level and using the plate amp. So there's foam all around these drivers, and the foam there's like an edge around the speaker, like a little rim around the speaker that kind of holds the foam in place. And this foam apparently has deteriorated. So the sound is reflecting a lot off this little edge and causing diffraction, which, interferes with the original wave coming from the speaker and gives you cancellations, which is probably responsible. Actually, he proves in the measurements, this is responsible for a lot of these peaks and dips in the response. So he basically puts in a lot more foam, stiffer foam, and basically does what Wilson intended, but does a better execution of it. And then he puts a what I'll call a real crossover in it. If I recall correctly, it had a first order crossover. And the problem you get with that is you get so much overlap between the drivers because there's not steep filters between them. So the woofer and the tweeter are reproducing a lot of the same frequencies in the mid-range around the crossover, right? And so what happens is as you move further away from one driver and closer to the other, i.e. when you stand up, you start to get all these weird cancellations. And he shows in the measurements, there's just a giant dip in the mid-range with these things when you stand up. And so, and that doesn't affect the sound only when you stand up. It affects the sound that goes into the room. It's what's called power response. And the power response of the speaker is supposed to be, consistent. And, if you don't have that, then you're going to get a weird sound reflecting from other parts of the room that doesn't match the sound that's coming from the speaker itself.
Yeah.
So he replaces that with a better crossover, and he basically does these 4 fixes. And the result he gets is it looks like a well-engineered speaker now. And, he talks about how well made the speaker is with these, this heavy Corian, weighs a ton, but it doesn't vibrate. David Wilson's decision to use Corian I think he was the first for speakers. And actually, a lot of people have moved on to materials like that for speakers. I mean, he was the first, and he got it right. But it just goes to show you that, there's a lot of criticisms people make of Danny, but his comprehension of the basics of speaker design is really good. And you were talking about how he talks about in here why he doesn't measure below 200 hertz, which a lot of people have criticized him for.
Yeah, we did like a whole episode talking about that. And you were speculating at that point. You were like, Danny knows how to measure below 200 hertz. And a lot of the guys on ASR were like, he doesn't know how to do it. And I think people have also criticized him for his third octave smoothing. He doesn't come right on and say, hey, here's why I knew these things. He's not responding to the haters, but I think he has been listening to the criticism, and I think he's explaining his methodology a little more. And, he explains. So one of the things that I like about this video is that he compares his measurements to John Atkinson's measurements. And he shows why do they look different and how can I make them look similar? And he talks about, Atkinson, when he's doing his measurements, direct mics the woofer, and you have to sum them, splice them. And I don't really need, he talks about the fact he doesn't need to do that because there's nothing he's going to do in changing the crossovers or anything like that that's going to affect the performance below 200 hertz. So why go through the trouble of doing that? And also the third octave smoothing is because the differences that he's making with regard to the crossover design, things like that, aren't going to make much higher resolution changes to the sound. So I thought it was a really good explanation of the finding the right tool for the job, doing the right measurements for the purposes that you're using them for. Danny is not measuring these speakers to perform this sort of measurement that you would do on a speaker, or the soundstage does, or John Atkinson does. Right. He's measuring for a very specific reason. And I thought he did a quite good job of explaining, here's why I do it, here's why I do it the way I do it, and here's why you see these differences. So
yeah. And, I have to point out that people say, well, he should still measure below 200 hertz so he knows what's going on down there and how it relates to the other stuff. But, below 200 hertz, when you're doing quasi-anechoic measurements like Danny does or like John Atkinson does in stereophile or like I do, there's a certain amount of guesswork involved since you're doing a separate measurement on the bass, right? Well, there is a formula you can use to scale the bass measurement. It's going to be a close mic measurement, perhaps, right? It could be also a ground plane measurement, but it's going to end up with a different level than your measurement of the speaker itself, which might be at 1 meter or 2 meters, whatever. There's a simple formula you can use, which I do use, but there's still some adjustment that you tend to make that relies a little bit on gut feel. And most guys I know just kind of eyeball it, right? Like get the curves to match up, because they will overlap, and you'll probably see a point where they kind of match up, and you'll go like, okay, that's it. But it's a judgment call. It's not precise unless you have an anechoic chamber or you do the whole measurement outdoors. I mean, there's ways to do it, but there's still some guesswork involved. And then of course you put the speaker in the room, and the bass response is going to be so affected by the room itself and how close you put the speaker to the wall or the corner, et cetera, et cetera. And so, bass is not, even if you have an anechoic chamber, your bass response of the speaker when you listen to it may not be what was intended. In fact, I would go so far as to say it probably won't be as intended. So getting a measurement of the bass relative to the rest of the sound, from 200 hertz on up, for Danny's purposes, is really not important. It's important for speaker reviewers, but for the purpose of speaker designers, it's not. And in fact, I've done a lot of consulting projects and on things like sound bars, Bluetooth speakers, stuff like that. A little bit on passive speakers, but in those cases, when we were doing, I was working with engineers, and we do the whole thing of like, listen to it, come up with your judgments, measure it, see what's wrong with it, change it, listen, measure, change, listen, measure, change. And when you do those measurements, you're just popping a measurement from 200 or 300 because that's the things that you're working on, right?
Right.
And the bass, you're probably just going to earball it kind of, and you're going to, you'll have a few people sitting in a room and you'll kind of try it. And then maybe you'll go in a different room and try it. And try some different positionings. Just kind of mess around with it till you get kind of a happy medium where everybody likes the balance of the bass to everything else. But yeah, for most R&D, you're not going to bother with doing a full frequency measurement. You're just going to do the quick quasi-anechoic measurement. And I've even done those in conference rooms, which is not great, but it gets the job done because you don't care about the lower frequencies. It's just Danny's right, and there's a friend of mine named Yasu Yamamoto. He was mentioning head-fi, and I'm kind of like, I don't get on there that much. And he said, "Why? You don't like people who've never done a measurement in their life telling you how to do measurements?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
man,
that's pretty much it. I do like head-fi. I don't want to criticize head-fi. I do like it. But yeah, if you're going to criticize measurements, do a lot of measurements first, then criticize.
So I got a question for you with regard to this video.
Okay.
Now, I think we would both be in enthusiastic agreement that with regard to the overall electroacoustic design of the speaker and the modifications that Danny made, and even some of the mechanical additions, significant. And I think the proof is in the pudding. How much difference do you think those tube connectors make, buddy?
0.0035 dB, and I can hear it. Maybe you can't, but I can hear it. Now, what you're talking about is he talks about this is the sort of problem with Danny, and that he's selling stuff. It's a problem. Yeah. He's selling stuff, and he kind of believes in cables and things like that. And he it's like so much of what he does is so scientifically based and so so based in solid engineering. But then he talks about everything that goes into the speaker, and it's just like, oh boy. He's talking about how there's ferrous materials in the binding post, which means steel. And he talks about how bad that is. But other than the fact that ferrous materials can rust, how much science is there on the effect of ferrous materials on sound quality?
Never seen a blind listening test.
I haven't either. Just like you can't find anyone. You can't hear the difference between different kinds of binding posts or different kinds of banana plugs and things like that. And yeah, these tube connectors that he puts on there, I looked them up. They're kind of nice. They're kind of groovy. It's like a banana plug basically, but a really high quality banana, or I should say banana jack, really high quality banana jack. That's perfectly okay, but like claiming that it makes a difference in the sound quality and claiming that, Wilson Audio was somehow
Delinquent.
Yeah. In choosing this or cheaping out somehow. It's like, well, no. And those tube connectors weren't available to my knowledge. I mean, I've never seen them on a pair of stock speakers.
Well, now the speaker that he's measuring here is the Wilson Audio Watt Puppy 8. So this is the new one that came out in 2024.
Wait, no, it's not really.
Well, I don't know. This is what the headline says. The GR Research headline is the $27,900 disappointment. Wilson Audio Watt Puppy 8 issues. So that the 8 is the new one, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'll confess, I don't keep up with the Wilson Audio line as much as I probably should, because there are so many other people who are so good at it.
Yeah.
I'm showing a little sarcasm. So, would you like to talk about something a little bit more artistically relevant?
Yes, let's do that.
We will.
This is Audio
Unleashed.
And as I teased in the intro, this time we started off talking about an article that we had punted on last episode. It's from the New Yorker, and it's actually not so much an article as it is a review, a book review. So the article is entitled, "Is There Any Escape from the Spotify Syndrome?" by Wasu. And it is a review of a book by Liz Pelly called Mood Machine, The Rise of Spotify and the Costs of the Perfect Playlist. This is territory that we have explored times in past. And basically, it's sort of a history of the business model of Spotify and similar outlets, medium, whatever, services. But she goes on to talk about how basically one of the bigger problems is that, as we've discussed before, Spotify controls playlists, and playlists are the thing. Everybody wants to be on the playlist, right? That's how a lot of people are discovering music. But Spotify is replacing actual musical artists with sort of ghosts artists, and it's either AI generated stuff or it is people who are on the payroll and are just like paid a flat rate for a song, and then Spotify never has to pay them royalties again. Which, look, it's if that weren't changing the shape of the music industry in and of itself, maybe it wouldn't be a problem. I hear some people go, "Oh, who cares? Just don't listen to those playlists or whatever." But that's the way a lot of people consume music, so it does have an impact. But ultimately, I think the reason we decided to dig into this is because John Darko of Darko Audio chimed in and released a video a couple of weeks ago called "Bye Bye Spotify." He's decided to quit. He has dropped his subscription, and he did a 13-minute video about all of the reasons why.
How is this important to audiophiles? Obviously, it is, or John Darko wouldn't have done something about it. And, he caters to audiophiles. So, and we've both dropped you dropped Spotify, right?
Oh, like over a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I dropped it more recently, maybe 3-4 months ago or something like that, just because I just got fed up with how sleazy they are. And it's very convenient to be able to find all that music, but there's other ways you can find that music. Certainly Qobuz is not evil, not in any way I know of. So I switched to Qobuz, and I have, I'm on my brother's family subscription for Apple because, which I don't use a whole lot, but because I don't really like the interface as much as I like Qobuz. But, you can get good quality from both of them. I don't. Yeah. I have Qobuz set at the lowest quality level. Because I'm streaming, man. I'm in my car or whatever. I'm at the gym, something. It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, when I review gear, I set it at a higher level, right? But normal use, I just you don't notice the difference. It just takes a lot longer to get the music. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, you're the anti-capitalist here. Why don't you rant a little bit?
Well, it's funny. I actually have an Apple Music subscription. I don't just do Apple Music. I do the whole sort of Apple family plan with Apple TV Plus and Apple Music, and I share that with my wife and my dad. I've tried to get my daughter and her husband to join the family plan as well, but they are so married to Spotify that they're like, no thanks. And you know what's funny is for them, it's the whole. All of their playlists are there. And this is the biggest problem I have with my wife. Like, even after I canceled our Spotify family plan and was like, hey, here is your Apple plan. Here's your log. It works now. Just use Apple Music. My wife used just the free crappy Spotify service for a while because all of her playlists were there and she didn't want to migrate them, and she didn't know about the playlist migration tools, and she knew the interface better. And that's one of the things my daughter and her husband have said is that they just know the interface. They understand the interface. They know where everything is.
It's a good interface.
So there's a lot of inertia there, I think. And one of the things that I've sort of forgot about, and John Darko brings up in his video that was excellent, is one of the things I miss is Spotify Connect. Now, John uses Tidal, which has Tidal Connect, but Qobuz doesn't have that. And Apple doesn't need it, I guess, or whatever. But yeah, Connect is good technology because then you're not streaming through your phone. You're basically using your phone as a remote, which I thought was a good plan. But I just wanted to sort of dig through the top level reasons that John said he quit, and we can sort of respond to these if you want to.
That's a good idea.
But his first one was still doesn't offer lossless. I don't care. Do you care?
I don't care, but some people do, and that's fine. It does make a difference. You can hear the difference. Not always, but usually there is a difference. And so yes, if I had a really high end system I was listening to all the time, instead of changing what I listen to like almost every day, because I'm a professional reviewer, yeah, sure, probably I prefer to. I mean, I would just set Qobuz to the higher quality level all the time and just listen only on that. But
yeah. Next up, he says Apple Music app is better looking on the Apple TV, and I would say that's true of Roku or whatever. I think the Apple Music app on a TV, in a system with a television, it's a nice looking 10-foot interface. Do people still use the phrase 10-foot interface, or is that outdated now?
I've forgotten about that, but it's still relevant.
Yeah. So I thought that was actually a good point. I actually like the look of the Apple Music app for smart TV systems. And I think, if I'm navigating music on a TV, what I want is quick and easy, seamless. I don't want to be fumbling around with a bunch of different options. I want it to be straightforward. I want it to be accessible. I want to look at it and immediately know what everything does. And I think Apple Music does a great job of that. So reason number 2, I think is a very good reason to switch over to Apple Music.
Okay.
Reason number 3, app clutter. Could not agree more. Just toward the end there, I realized sort of like every time I open Spotify, I'm like, wait, where is this? Where do I go to do this? I would get lost constantly, and I should not get lost in an app that I, subscribed to for, at that point, 11 years or something like that. You had any experience with that?
No. I love their interface. I kind of miss it. It's arguably better than Qobuz, but Qobuz gives me more unexpected recommendations, which I do like. I prefer their recommendation algorithm. Yeah. And I should just add here, I've never made a playlist in any of these things. Because, I'm an explorer, man.
I've got one playlist. And I had a playlist in Spotify, and I've never moved it over to Apple Music or Qobuz, and I might need to, but it's a playlist I only use when I'm racing.
Racing?
So, yeah.
Like racing what?
The Corvette.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe it was like a half marathon or you were running.
No. Like when I'm driving, like when I'm racing, when I'm on the track, there's this very specific playlist that I love.
Or maybe some dorky, like racing game on whatever game platform.
Well, I also used to use it when I was playing Racing Sims. Yeah.
Okay.
So But other than that, I'm not a playlist guy. No, I'm an album guy, I think. So
yeah. Me too. And also I kind of tend to, I don't like to listen. I don't like to establish, say, this is my taste and I want to just keep listening to this. I like to go find stuff I haven't found. And I mean, I listen to a lot of old stuff. I was listening to the first Kiss album last night before I went to bed.
Nice.
I'm not really sure why I did that, but I did.
So then he talked about the royalty payments, which we've already talked about. Yeah. And he sort of segues into streaming is too cheap, which is he kind of lost the plot with me on this one. Basically, it's sort of like, we spend too little money for streaming. I don't know if he really, I wasn't convinced by that one, but then he moves on to talk about the Ghost in the Machine, the sort of the way that Spotify is gaming its own system by padding playlists with ghost musicians,
which is just as sleazy as it could be, in my view.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest reason to quit right now.
Yeah,
and I thought he articulated it really, really, really well. He articulated it better than I've ever articulated it. So that was my favorite part of the video.
Yeah, and all this, AI generated, I'm very critical of music that is AI generated or that sounds like it's AI generated, which is a huge amount of the pop music nowadays, has lost so much of the human element. And I think anyone who's trying to further that is I think on some level evil.
Yeah.
And anti-human.
Yeah. Right.
So, which, may well fit the Spotify management. Maybe not the evil, but maybe the evil, but the anti-human part, I think, is demonstrable.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say I have just as big of a beef with a different streaming service.
What's that one?
And that would be YouTube, which I use every day. But, and you can stream music through YouTube, and I think, God, everybody does at some point or another, because there's a lot of stuff that's only on YouTube, and somehow they're able to avoid, you could find like all the 80s King Crimson albums on there years and years ago in, questionable levels of quality, because some people did, vinyl dubs or who knows what. But you could find all that stuff, or more to the point, the Andy Summers, Robert Fripp albums from the 80s, which I just love. There's two of them, and they're just great. And those were just not available on anything but YouTube, where somebody had just uploaded them. And
there was that Sahib Shahab album that I wanted you to listen to that I couldn't find anywhere except on YouTube. Although aside, sorry, digression real quick. I found out it is available on Qobuz. It's just under a different name. It's called Conversations.
Oh, cool. I'll check it out then. I did listen to a little bit of it.
Yeah, the LP was called Sahib's Jazz Party and After Hours, but when it was released on CD, it was called Conversations, and that's the name. It's available on all the streamers.
Here's my beef with YouTube, and it's not the problem of YouTube streaming music, which I think is great in so many ways. The problem is what YouTube is doing to musicians, and YouTube is turning music into an athletic event rather than an artistic event. And there's so much of what's on YouTube that's like, I just saw a group of kids playing YYZ, the Rush instrumental that's famous. And it's like, well, that's impressive. I couldn't do that when I was 16. But it's kind of like, all right, kids, great. You played YYZ. Now what are you now what do you have to offer? And so many, and not just kids, it's people, a lot of it's like, oh, this, 10-year-old bass player can play the bass line from Peg or whatever, right? And there's so much of that, and it's more like, oh, I proved I can do this, right? Or it's somebody, there's the whole Davey 504 thing, and I love Davey 504, but it's just a lot of bass show-off stuff. I mean, that's not bass playing; that's just show-offy. It's athletic stuff. It's like, I remember there was a Carlos Santana interview in Guitar Player, and they were talking about, guitar players that, demonstrate a lot of technical facility. And Carlos said, I can't listen to that stuff, man. He's like, after a while, it's just like watching some cat pick up weights. And he's right. And, at the time I thought like, oh, that's wrong. But the older I've gotten, the more I realize he was just dead right about it. So much of this is just technical show off. And I can't stand it. And it's just like all these kids, it's like their goal in music is to be able to replicate a performance from 40 years ago. Where's that getting us? That's not getting us anywhere. It's just, I think it's part of the stagnation of the whole music industry is a lot because of YouTube and these people focusing on doing stuff on YouTube or TikTok, right? Where they show off their skill rather than doing art.
Right. Yeah.
But however, we here at Audio
Unleashed,
we do art music for our bumper music. Well, we
do. We now?
We do. There's no technical show off because there's no technique to show off. And, but it's art, man. I mean, you can judge it as you will, but it's a sincere effort to do something creative and interesting. And there's lots of people that do that, but that's not what gets attention on YouTube. That's not what gets into my recommendation queue in YouTube.
Oh, I'm doing the segue this time. Hang on. Sorry, I didn't mean to Babe Ruth this,
okay,
but
go ahead. Segue.
This is why I'm so excited this is why I'm excited about having a record player now, because as I've said before, the record player is just like that is my ticket into the coolest club in town, which is a record store. Our local record store, Village Green Records here in Montgomery, the proprietor of that store figured out my taste within, I would say, 2 months of getting to know me in a way that no algorithm ever has. Like, I was flipping through the racks one day and I just saw a cover that looked interesting. And I was like, hey, what's this? Would I dig that? And he looked at me and he was like, that is exactly the sort of ambient post-rock stuff that you eat up. And I was like, wait, do I like ambient post-rock stuff? Wait a minute. I kind of do. I just never thought of that as a genre that I was into, but he picked up on it. He also picked up that I have a weird attraction to Norwegian artists across a diverse spectrum of genres. And I never noticed that so many of my favorite artists are Norwegian, but he picked up on it with just like I said, within a couple of months.
Wow.
No algorithm has ever picked up on that. Right.
Wow.
And so he is constantly turning me onto stuff that I don't think even Qobuz or YouTube or whatever would have ever turned me on to. So that human connection really means a lot to me because it's more meaningful and also it's more accurate.
That's pretty amazing. But that's a good segue into our next segment, which will be about the physics of vinyl.
Yeah.
Because that's what you're into. You're into the physics, and you're into vinyl because it's technically superior to digital, which has stair steps. We're gonna dig into that, and you'll present your case for vinyl, your technical case for vinyl, and I'll refute it.
Okay. All right, is that what we're doing? Is that the roles we're gonna play?
That's the plan. Yeah.
All right. We'll be right back.
We are back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
And we're going to talk about an article that's probably the most controversial article that's happened in maybe the last year, called The Physics of Vinyl, a Sonic Hug in a World of Noise. This article is by Andy Oattes, Oattes, founder of Apex Audio Group. Apparently he does basically marketing for audio brands.
The description on LinkedIn says, driving strategic growth, sales and marketing, building high-impact networks, innovating distribution models. I don't know what any of that stuff means, but I'm sure there are people sitting around a boardroom table going, yeah, that means something.
I just want to say, everybody's got to make a living. And, whatever your pitch to make a living is, fine. You got to make a living, man. And you got to have some kind of pitch, just like we have a pitch here on Audio
Unleashed.
And our pitch is
I'm waiting. This is going to be good.
We're bringing our vision and helping people work together to find new and more satisfying ways to interact with the music and art that makes our life so rich. Is that
you didn't
good?
use the word synergy anywhere in that, though.
No, it was synergy between people that make audio gear and people that make music, and it's going to be.
You're not good at this. You're not good at
Actually,
this.
I am. I'm trying to do something kind of plausible, but I've actually done these marketing statements for people, and it's all just total BS. But anyway, So this guy basically seems to think up these marketing statements for people and also write a blog. And so since I read this thing and you didn't, I'm going to recall basically what he said. He said a few things. He gets into, as he says, it's actually a pretty good title, The Physics of Vinyl, and then A Sonic Hug in a World of Noise. So he gets into the technical aspects of it, of why vinyl is superior. And then the sonic hug in the world of noise part is more the cultural aspects of it. So on the technical side, and this is where a lot of people attacked him on Facebook, including, did Sean Olive? This is a Sean Olive tip, by the way. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, this was a Sean Olive tip. Yeah.
Doug Schneider was on there from Soundstage and some other people. And I refrained because I thought I'll save my statements for this podcast, right?
Good plan. Keep your powder dry.
Yeah. So he basically talks about how, vinyl is a needle in a groove, and it makes a continuous waveform. And then he talks about how digital has stair steps in it, right? Because you're only sampling once every, in CD quality audio, you're sampling once every 44,000th of a second, right?
Yeah.
So supposedly vinyl is all these stair steps, and he says, you can absolutely hear these things. And he presents no proof of that. He just says that you can hear it.
Wow. And
he goes on and on about, oh my gosh, this is a typical sort of statement from high-end audio people who don't know anything about music. It's just so difficult. It's so complicated to get that little needle through all these grooves and have music come out. And it's just so delicate and so fragile and so complicated. And I hate it when people say that, because you know what? I have a little JBL Bluetooth speaker it cost me like $39. And if there's any musical artist I'm familiar with, you can play it and that's the artist. I know who it is. I can tell you what the harmonic movement of it is, etc. Music is not fragile. Music is robust.
Yeah.
Music still gets its message through, even through really crummy gear. I mean, I fell in love with music because of a crummy little Sears 8-track player that had like 3-inch speakers in it. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that music is just this fragile thing, and that, oh my God, turntables are just so delicate, and you need to go out and just spend colossal amounts of money to be able to get them to even really work at all. And it's just, oh my God, it's like Jam Brady. This is horrible. And so, but then he gets into like all these cultural things, these cultural critique things. And he sort of seems to envision himself as a cultural critic. And he talks about the art elsewhere on his website in the articles he didn't take down. And by the way, like, never take down your art. Never admit a mistake, right?
No.
Never be like George Lucas, changing the music at the end of Return of the Jedi from the Ewok song into like this just generic world music, because he's admitting he made a mistake, right?
Yeah. Yub Nub was not a mistake.
Yub Nub was awesome. And, so it's like, don't ever do that. Don't ever do that. Live with it. Defend what you did. And he did get on, apparently he did somewhere defend what he did and kind of try to weasel out of it. But then he just pulled the whole thing down because he didn't want to get ridiculed. And he's a marketing guy trying to make a buck, right? And we're not helping that, but whatever.
No,
that's not our job. You know what? There are plenty of press people who would be more than happy to help businessmen in the high-end audio biz, sell their stuff, who think it's their job to do that. And we don't. Our job is to be fair and reasonably well-informed. But, he talks a lot about this, like, slowing down and, how physical, media is so essential, meaning vinyl, basically, I guess. And he makes it this cultural, he's got a whole website devoted to the art of slowdown, right?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that part. I really don't.
I mean,
awesome. I'm with it. I think that has been one of the things that I've, aside from the whole music discovery aspect and the community aspect, just the ritual, the tea ceremony of it all is the thing that really resonates the most with me with regard to vinyl. I love it. But that doesn't mean that it's a technically superior format. Right. There's a difference between the objective and the subjective, right? So let's not cross the streams here, buddy, just because we need to slow down and just because vinyl is great for a sort of meditative experience doesn't mean there's anything. I mean, if there's any, as you've said before, if there's any science going on here, it is psychology.
Yeah,
so.
It really is. And it's an appealing pitch. And we've seen this before. There was that article we talked about back when we were in our first iteration as the Soundstage Audiophile podcast. Mm-hmm. We talked about an article by Jim Austin at Stereophile called Slow Listening. Which is basically the same sort of thing, but it should be, intentional, whatever the hell that means. And, meaningful and blah, 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 blah. And it values physical, grounded experiences. And it's kind of like, I just want to listen to music.
Yeah.
And finally, frankly, I find, what's enriching to me about music is being involved in music, and checking out new artists and stuff and thinking of old stuff I haven't heard in ages and revisiting it and learning more about music and appreciating different genres that I haven't really dug into all that much and things like that. It's not like whether, what my source of the music is. In this case, the medium is not the message.
Right.
And if I pissed off some Marshall McLuhan fans, so much the better.
Well, and also so much of this stuff about vinyl is just, so much of it is based on misconceptions. So much of it is based on ignorance. And as our friend John Higgins talked about in a new piece for Digital Trends, in a piece called It's Time We Admit to and Accept Vinyl's Dirty Secret, most of the stuff is digital anyway. Most of the vinyl that has been produced since 1979 has got a digital step somewhere along the way. Again, back in our old Soundstage Audiophile podcast days, we talked about the MoFi controversy, the fact that they were, going to DSD. And I think you and I both agreed at the time, the only mistake they made there was pretending that they didn't do that. But so much of vinyl is taken from digital masters. And there was this wonderful video that John and I were talking about this article before we published it. And I sent him this video from a guy whose channel is called AP Mastering. He talked about something I didn't even realize is that basically since 1979, even the lathes have a digital conversion step because they have digital delay to basically allow the lathe to have a look ahead function. So basically all of the Ampex stuff since 1979, there has been an A to D, D to A process in the cutting lathe. So even if you have got one of the new AAA masters from, Rhino High Fidelity, there's a good chance that the cutting lathe has got a digital step in it. So does it matter? Yeah. No, come on.
I should say, when this all was happening, I also conveniently got an email from the Absolute Sound. It was sending me an article by Michael Fremmer, a brief write-up for their awards on this Wilson Benesch GMT-1 turntable, which is $300 some odd thousand, right? But he's bragging about how, he did this video where he recorded from this fancy turntable the UHQR 45 RPM version of Steely Dan's Babylon Sisters, and then distributed it on YouTube, which of course knocks it down to 256 kilobits per second compressed audio, right? Then he's claiming listeners can easily hear this system's superb musicality, detail resolution, and absence of additive resonant characteristics on a track familiar to most everyone listening. The usual, I'm paraphrasing here, the usual troll comments are MIA, as people are disarmed and floored by what they hear. And it's like, so I thought okay, you know what? I'll give it a chance. I mean, I think it's completely bogus to try to demonstrate these extremely subtle things through YouTube, through who knows what people are listening to, probably an okay set of headphones, plugged into their laptop or their phone or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, so he's making all these claims that people can hear, even through, the compression of YouTube, this pretty significant data reduction of YouTube, and the fact that it's converted to digital, and the fact that you're listening through whatever, people are, it's an absurd demonstration in the first place, right?
Yeah.
But then I went and listened to it, and we're going to put the link in here because everyone should go listen to this. And I listened to it after he, blah, 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 blah.
There was a lot of that.
People like to hear him talk. So good for him. But, he finally plays it. I'm like, what is going on there? It's like there's a weird reverb to it. I'm kind of like, I think I know Babylon Sisters. I don't think it sounds like that. So I went to Qobuz and played it, and it doesn't sound like that. I'm just going to assume Michael is going to record straight out of the phono preamp and the CH Precision P10, which he cites here, and record that straight into a computer or whatever, some kind of reasonable resolution. Yeah. And yet it sounds like he just put a microphone out in the room.
It kind of did. Yeah.
It has like kind of room tone to it, like a really, not even like a nice sounding reverb, like a crap reverb, like a reverb that, Donald Fagen and Walter Becker would not have chosen. And I'm just like, wait, and you go down in the comments section and people are raving about this.
Yeah.
It's the Emperor's New Clothes. It's just so ridiculous that people somehow have been convinced that this is somehow superior, and it doesn't hold water. But I encourage people to go listen to it, and then go listen to Babylon Sisters from any streaming service or your CD or your vinyl.
Yeah.
It sounds, I've heard this on vinyl. I used to have Gaucho on vinyl. Maybe I still do. I think I gave it to Gordon Soak. But, I've heard this on vinyl, and the vinyl sounded fine. It didn't sound weird like this.
Right.
And maybe it's some weird version. I've heard versions of tunes, right, where jazz stuff in the 70s, they added a lot of reverb sometimes that in the reissues they took out. But that's not the case. Steely Dan made good records. Good, whether you like them, the records sound fantastic, which is why audiophiles use them all the time.
Yeah. And
this sounds horrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah. But people are lapping it up, which goes to show, like any, God, I hate to call Michael Fremer a charismatic leader, but
he is.
Any charismatic leader who tells you something and states it as the truth, their followers are just going to go, yep, I hear it.
I'm not saying this turntable's bad. Why would this turntable sound like this? The turntables don't sound like this. Something is wrong. Either he did the recording wrong, or something happened in there that messed it up, or I can't imagine this pressing is that bad. Come on.
Yeah.
But people should go listen to this thing, and then go listen to it on any streaming service you want.
Just flip over to any other YouTube channel where they ripped this album off CD, and I'll take it over that any day of the week. But yeah, there was something weird going on. But the bigger problem is the number of people in the comments going, "Oh yes, that's just the best thing ever." Anyway, you ready to wrap this thing up and do some credits, bud?
Let's make it happen.
All right, man. I'm going to say this is a Butterburger production, because for whatever reason, you always forget that one.
And the music, if Dennis actually sends me some tracks to ever work with,
sorry, man.
It will be new, but probably it will just be some of the same old retreads that we've been recycling for years now, because Dennis won't send me any new tracks.
I'm sorry, bud. Life's been a lot, man. I
know life's been a lot, but you would be elevated from that by creating new tracks for me.
That's a good point. I'm trying to figure out the bridge.
Take you away.
I'm trying to figure out the bridge. As soon as I can crack the bridge, I got a new track for you, but I just can't figure out the transition to the bridge. So,
did that ever stop James Brown?
That is a good point, but I am not James Brown, sir.
I think you need to slow down, Dennis.
That's a good point. I do need to slow down.
Shoot.
Anyway, any other credits we need to throw out?
Thank you to Sean Olive
for
tipping us off to that dude who buried his own blog. Bring it back. Yeah. Reveal yourself.
And thank you to Michael for the comment on the Patreon page about the increased peaks. And again, if I butchered your name, I'm sorry, Michael, but thanks for that one.
Okay, that's it. So now we can just say goodbye.
Yeah,
and
goodbye.
Also tell people, there's a Patreon segment coming up.
That's true, but only if you pay for it.
Yeah.
All right, everybody else, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or two early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic or something that's a little more personal to us or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah, and so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
Or Audio
Unleashed. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.